Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to reintroduce to you now. Dr. Ryan Attar is a returning guest on our show. Be sure to check out his first appearance on episode 186 of Boundless Body Radio. Dr. Ryan Attar is an expert in managing type 1 diabetes. Dr. Attar is a veteran of the U.S. Army, and after serving overseas, Dr. Attar developed type 1 diabetes himself and was medically discharged from the Army after nearly 6 years of service. After the military, Dr. Attar decided to embark on a new career to aid those with diabetes and other health issues. He graduated in 2017 from the University of Bridgeport with a doctorate in naturopathic medicine and a master's in human nutrition. Dr. Attar has been living and thriving with diabetes for 15 years and helps his patients achieve better blood glucose, A1C, and weight loss results. He is very active in the Type 1 Grit online diabetes community, a group that was studied in 2018 in the journal Pediatrics, and has written several articles on the diabetes website, Diabetes Daily. When not practicing medicine, Dr. Attar is an avid traveler, having been to over 75 countries. Dr. Attar also enjoys fitness, weightlifting, and is currently a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. You can find Dr. Attar on his website at www.drattar.com and on Twitter by his name, which is Ryan Attar. Dr. Ryan Attar, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do too. I love your content, your videos, and your interviews. So great.
Wow, that's very, very kind. I really appreciate the kind feedback, and I really appreciate your work as well. I love how outspoken you are about some of the nonsense that we see in this community, especially coming from our trusted sources that should be giving us good information that just absolutely are not, like the American Diabetes Association. It seems to get worse and worse over time. And I love how outspoken you are about that kind of thing. So yeah, we'll definitely be covering that as well. I realized in the introduction that like we were talking offline and you asked if it had been about a year since we last chatted. It's actually been about 3. You were back in episode 186 of Boundless Body, which was quite a while ago. And yeah, we've done several episodes about type 1 diabetes since then, but yours was kind of the first one that we did that covered the topic. And so we really appreciated you coming on and helping educate us about that.
Yeah, I love talking about this stuff and happy to continue to talk about it.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Last night was the very first game ever in Salt Lake City with our new ice hockey team. It was a preseason game, but it was amazing. And I went there and I realized, like, listening to my own voice in the introduction, my voice is a little bit hoarse from like cheering at the hockey game last night. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you and just kind of remind us, if you don't mind, about your story about how you've been diagnosed. It has been several years since you've been on. So I would love it if you could, like, refresh us about what your time was like in the military and then getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and what that was like for you.
Yeah, so I never thought I would be working in any kind of health field. I didn't do that when I was in the military, when I was in the Army. Yeah, like as you mentioned, I came down with type 1 diabetes while I was serving. I was in from 2002 for 6 years, and I was diagnosed in 2006, and I was actually stationed in Germany at the time. And I had 2 years before that had deployed to Iraq. So I did deployment there, and then I spent a couple of years stationed in Germany. Came down with type 1 diabetes, typical symptoms that somebody comes down with when they have type 1 diabetes, when your body no longer is producing insulin or making much less insulin because of an autoimmune attack on your pancreas. So your immune system destroys the cells that make insulin, and it makes you insulin dependent. So I lost a lot of weight, and then I was like peeing constantly. And what happens when you have high blood sugar is it overloads your kidneys, and that glucose spills out into your urine. So you just constantly pee. And it actually, I remember my bathroom smelling sweet. And yeah, it's because it's
Wow.
literally sugar, glucose in your diabetes mellitus. The medical term means flowing honey, siphoning of honey. And yeah, that's basically what's happening. So yeah, I got medic. I was in for about a year after I got diagnosed, and then was medically retired, and I got out and listened to whatever my doctors told me to do. And and I was always very disciplined with diet even before this. Not in like a health way, but I can do whatever I'm told is I need to do for food. And I trace this back to being a wrestler all my life. Like when I was a kid and teen, I was a wrestler, so I was always cutting weight. And you have to be very disciplined to be in high school and, eat like 500 calories a day so you can make weight for a match on Friday. So that kind of like molded me to be able to do whatever. And so, with this attitude and being a soldier too, I'm very disciplined. I would go to my doctors, hey, what do I need to do to be healthiest? What should I be eating? Um, and I get it. Majority of people are not going to make dietary changes for chronic conditions. Maybe not a majority, but a good portion of people just aren't going to do that. They want a pill. They don't want to work on their diet and lifestyle. And so I get it. Doctors, aren't giving out these kind of treatments because they just don't have patients that do it. But here I am, a patient saying, "Hey, doctor, I'll do whatever. What's the best way?" And I never got any good dietary advice. In fact, as soon as I started cutting out the carbs and started getting really good control of my blood sugars, they were actually discouraging me from continuing that diet. They said you need to eat those carbs, and it's not going to do you any good. Even telling me, my A1C level, which is the test that diabetics do for kind of gives you a 3-month assessment of how your blood sugars have been. My A1C's kept getting better and better, and at one point I had a very normal A1C, and my doctor told me to increase it. You need to get that A1C up because it's too low for a diabetic, and which doesn't make any sense at all. There's no, maybe he's assuming that I'm having low blood sugars in order to achieve that, but I showed that I'm not. I showed that I'm having normal blood sugars, but didn't matter. It didn't matter. I just got really frustrated, as I kept learning more and more about diet and nutrition and diabetes. And actually got onto a low carb diet in 2010 from my CrossFit gym. And in 2010, CrossFit was still a very, very new thing. And it was like the only gym in the city I was living in, the only CrossFit gym. And they were way ahead of the curve, first opening a gym before they're everywhere now. And then coming up with a low carb diet plan in 2010 was way ahead of the curve. So that got me started down the path of what I'm doing now. And after too many doctor's appointments where I was just frustrated and not even getting congratulated for having good numbers, I was like, I got to go back to school and do this myself. And initially, I wanted to just be a nutritionist, and so I started my master's in nutrition. And I didn't know what a naturopathic physician was, but my school had the program, and basically, I would expand my scope of practice and be able to do more and actually practice instead of just consult. Yeah, been doing this since 2017, and couldn't be happier. And I get to help more and more people. And probably like a big change, even from when we talked, is how accessible the information and all of this is now. Because in the past, it would take type 1 diabetics years and years to be able to find out that there's other options. Usually, they're starting to get complications, and then that motivates them to say, "Hey, is there something else I can be doing to be healthier?" But now I'm getting so many patients reaching out to me 2 weeks after they're diagnosed, saying, "I read about Dr. Bernstein's method and the low carb method for managing type 1. Found your website. Can you help me manage things?" And so happy that this information is out there and it's so accessible now, because it wasn't before. And so yeah, there's more and more people catching on right away. And yeah, I'm really happy to see that, and really happy to help people when they do discover that and help them navigate this. Yeah.
Dude, that is so great to hear. I think that's what most of us want, is for this message to get out, and to actually hear that it is amazing, and
Yeah.
frankly a little bit surprising given the powers that be, like we mentioned earlier. I
Yeah.
think it really speaks to your character that you learned about this stuff for yourself and then got so fired up about it that you wanted to help other people with it. I'm curious. I try to ask every doctor this, like, what was your education like as you were going through nutrition school and then, getting your PhD? Like, what was that like for you as far as the nutrition education that you were receiving? Like, were you receiving what you would consider now like the right information, or was it just stuff you needed to like get through to then be able to get the credentials to then teach what you know to be true now?
So the nutrition program I went through was actually a really good program that has a lot of like functional medicine, functional nutrition type approach. Um, and so it wasn't like a dietitian program that your typical dietitian that works in the hospital that's giving people the my plate guidelines and following the ADA standards. It wasn't that at all. It was a very open nutrition, like teaching the basics and delving into different dietary approaches, but kind of letting us make the decision of how to navigate it with patients. The naturopathic medical program itself also heavily focused on nutrition. We have, I think, a normal MD program. They always say it's like they have like only 24 hours of nutrition coursework in their medical school. We had 2 years of nutrition classes. So that's on top of my master's degree. I had 2 years of nutrition classes in that program too. And it's a bit of everything. So it's not a low carb keto is the best. We delve into everything, and then people use that knowledge as they see fit. And and I'm someone too when it comes to that. I'm very passionate about my diet and using this to manage type 1 diabetes. But for me, I don't think that everyone needs to be eating this way unless they have health issues that could benefit from it. Many people do, of course. But yeah, so I don't like push the diet on somebody that doesn't need it. However, half the country is at least pre-diabetic. So that's almost the majority of people could benefit from cutting out the carbs and getting better control of their blood sugars and losing weight. And all you can do that very, very well with low carb, keto, or carnivore diet.
Yeah. Okay. That's very well explained. Why don't we go into a little bit of detail about the exact diet? Why is it that a low carbohydrate diet works so well, in particular for type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so for any diabetes in general, it works well. For type 2, which are the majority of diabetics out there, are type 2 diabetics and pre-diabetics. It does work well for them. For type 1s, and I will say this too, I've seen type 2 diabetics that got their blood sugars under control, not doing a low carb diet. Not, it's they lost weight, they started exercising, um, addressed nutritional deficiencies, addressed inflammatory issues, and got their diet under control from the processed foods and other things. It's possible to do better. I think low carb is kind of the most nutritious and best way to do it, but I've seen others diets, right? With type 1 diabetes, we're dealing with injected insulin. And when I eat a meal, I have to take insulin every time I have that meal. Matching up that dose of insulin with the meal effect is tricky. In a low carb diet, my needs for insulin go way down. And so I can inject a very small amount of insulin, and matching up kind of the blood sugar spike with that dose is very easy. As soon as you start stacking on carbohydrates, you're dealing with a big potential spike and a big dose of insulin. And these two curves are tough to match up. And that's why you see a typical type 1 diabetic having up and down blood sugars all day long and into blood sugars that are higher than a non-diabetic would ever see. And that's kind of a normal daily thing for most type 1 diabetics, unless they're doing the low carb Bernstein approach like I'm doing. And then they can see nice flat stable lines. And for anyone listening or watching that knows blood sugar levels, my blood sugar is almost 24/7 in the 80s and 90s, and occasionally spiking up 100, 110. But usually that's a flat, stable line in the 80s and 90s. You'll see standard type 1 diabetic, and they're spiking to 140, 150, 160, 200. And the American Diabetes Association's standards are like they want you between 70 and 180 70% of the time. So even higher than that 180, 200, whatever, 30% of the time, which is, I think, 6 hours in the day. That's it could be higher than that. So it's already at a too high standard, and then can spike even higher in other times of the day. And that's when you look at standard type ones blood sugar graphs. That's what you see, and it's those elevated blood sugars are damaging every cell and organ in your body, and yeah, we don't want that. And I want to live complication free, and the way to do that is normal blood sugar. So yeah, the basically the kind of physics behind injected insulin and the spike from food with type 1 really only works with a low carb diet.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've seen your blood sugar curves and I would refer the listener to go check them out. But dude, no offense. I just have to tell you, they're so boring. Nothing happens. It's totally flat. It's just like snooze fest when I check out your blood sugar curves.
And I eat really well too. I love food. I love good food. And you know, cutting out bread, pasta, starchy root vegetables doesn't mean your food is going to be boring. Like you can eat really, really well. And so, even if someone is a carnivore too, that's to me, that's the best food anyway. The meat, chicken, fish, shellfish, eggs. Yeah, I eat well. I love food, and yeah, bonus, I get good blood sugars because of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was going to ask you about the food that you were consuming and ask whether it was a sacrifice for you to be eating this way, low carb, keto, carnivore. Was it a sacrifice for you to like give up some of those foods, knowing that you could try to play the game of like covering, carbohydrate foods with more insulin? First of all, it sounds like a tough game to play, like you said, but like it's still a sacrifice. You have to go without, pasta and pizza and that kind of thing. Is it a
Yeah.
terrible sacrifice for you?
When I started doing this around 2010, there wasn't as much out there. There wasn't all of these low carb products out there. There wasn't all these websites with recipes on them. There wasn't all this social media community support for doing that. So it was definitely tougher back then. And but I still, saw my blood sugars and just pushed through it. But yeah, socially then it was tougher. As well as going onto a restaurant in 2010 and having them swap my potatoes for steamed broccoli was, a couple steps going back and forth to try to explain what I need. Now there's no questions asked. Oh, sure, we'll swap that out. Yeah, here's a salad instead of that. So things have gotten much, much easier. One thing I always mention is that there's no cure for type 1 diabetes. And if you're type 1 diabetic, you're always going to see headlines saying cure is 5 years away. It's been like that for 30 years. So don't I hope for a cure, but don't get your hopes up. Have normal blood sugars now. That being said, if I was magically cured of type 1 diabetes today, I wouldn't change my diet at all. I'm healthier because of it. I look at my peers. I'm 44. I look at my peers who are all overweight and insulin resistant, and I'm the diabetic. And they look at me, Ryan, how are you so healthy? And you're the diabetic here, and it's the food, it's the diet. And so yeah, like again, I enjoy the food, I enjoy the health benefits, I feel good, and it keeps me healthy.
That's such a profound statement to say that if I could cure you automatically, your diet would not change. There's just so many other benefits to this diet. And you're right. At the end of the day, we're talking about some pretty delicious foods that are really difficult to get sick of. So I
Yeah,
totally understand. But that is a very profound statement to say that, like, if you cured me today, I wouldn't change. It's like, it reminds me of every conference I go to where Dr. Baker gets on stage and says, like, look, what if we're wrong about all of this and all of you are going to die of heart attacks tomorrow because you've been eating so much cholesterol? Would any of you change the way you're eating? And like nobody says yes. Like they all say I would continue doing this exact same thing.
yeah. I mean, I couldn't be happier with the diet. And I have a lot of respect for people who discover this way of eating and don't have a chronic health issue. Because I'm in a sense, I was almost lucky to get type 1 diabetes. I am healthier right now than I would have been had I never gotten type 1 diabetes, because I would have had no reason to change my diet. And I'd like to think that I would keep myself in shape, but if like most of my peers, I probably would have started putting on some weight and getting a little insulin resistant. And yeah, because of the type 1 diabetes, I've just been super healthy and fit because I
Yeah.
have to take everything more seriously. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's such a cool thing to be able to say. You alluded to this already, but I don't want to miss how important this is. Let's say in an alternate universe, you were not you in the way that you were very curious and you wanted to learn about this stuff. Let's say you just went to the doctor, they diagnosed you, they told you what to do. What, how would you have foreseen your future? Like knowing how this is managed for most people, what kinds of things would you have run into over time? As
So
far
wait,
as like
say again.
as far as basically a poorly worded question, if you would have continued down the path of just I'm going to do whatever my doctor says, I'm going to continue
Oh,
eating
sure.
a
Yeah.
normal
Yeah.
diet and taking insulin, what would have happened? Like again, it's speculative, but from what you've observed from other people who are dying or or diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, like how would you have foreseen that happening over time?
All right. So at this point, I've had diabetes 18 years. I'm coming up on 2 decades. Um, you definitely see in the type 1 world complications occurring even in half that time, even in 8 to 10 years. You'll see the beginnings of retina damage, retinopathy, so bleeds on the retinas that you have to go in and get injections into your eyeball or lasers into the retina to burn off the nerves that are bleeding. um, you start seeing a really common complication that I feel like most type 1s don't even recognize as a complication of diabetes is something called gastroparesis. So the high blood sugars are damaging nerves and cells in the body, and it can damage the nerves that control your stomach and intestines. So it makes for a lot of constipation, a lot of irregular stomach emptying, which could mean acid reflux, and it can mean food sitting in your stomach for too long, and then you take insulin and you can't match the insulin timing with your food emptying from your stomach. It can be really difficult, and that's another complication you see really commonly among soft tissue issues like frozen shoulder is because of that glycation to the soft tissue. Yeah, all of these complications are so common among type 1s. And I certainly, if I was aiming for the kind of ADA and most endocrinologists guidelines for blood sugar control, I would see th those complications by now. An American Diabetes Association says to aim for an A1C under 7, which is more than double an average blood sugar than that a normal person has, a non-diabetic has.
Wow, that's crazy. And those are just the first things that come on, right? Later on, it's, the heart disease and other chronic conditions that come on after several decades of poorly managed type 1 diabetes. Is that correct?
Correct. Actually, can I share my screen to show you something real quick?
What's that?
Can I share my screen and show you something?
Please.
Um, I have this. You, you know of all my on Twitter, my posts, to the American Diabetes Association, and kind of calling them up and stuff. I have a PowerPoint with all kind of those slides that I've saved.
Oh, great.
But this one is kind of exactly what we're talking about. So you can see this all right?
Yeah, I can definitely see it. If you're listening and not watching, be sure to click the link and go to YouTube where we'll have this posted because this is going to be really interesting to look at the data that Ryan is presenting. Yeah.
So this graphic is from the American Diabetes Association, praising type 1s for aiming for A1C under 7. This graph here is looking at A1C and incidence of retinopathy. Retinopathy is the retina damage in your eyes. So that 7% is right there. And why that's halfway up this climb of increase in incidence of retinopathy. So why on earth would you want to aim for your blood sugars to be there? And for reference, my A1C is not even on here. So my last A1C was 4.4. The lowest A1C on here is 5.5.
Wow.
And I'm not surprised because so few type ones. I don't know that this is even for this graph is for type ones. It might just be all diabetics, but it's so rare for someone to get good control of their blood sugars that they don't even have, participants in these studies with A1Cs in the normal range like that. But if you continue this graph down, it's going to be the lowest incidence of retinopathy because my nerves aren't getting overloaded with glucose and damaging them. That's what's basically going on with retinopathy.
Okay, so I'm looking at this graph, and there's some ups and downs and some undulations for sure. Like not every data point is perfectly linear, but if you look at the
Yeah,
overall trend, it is very linear. And
yeah,
what it's praising is somewhere right in the middle of retinopathy, if I'm understanding this right. So it's like, well, yeah, like if you're in the middle, that's better than the people with really high A1C. But why are we not looking further down the curve when it's much lower?
yeah,
It's fairly
yeah,
linear.
yeah. It's insane. Um, but yeah, so I mean that's where the standard of care wants type ones, and that's why incidents of retinopathy are so common, and as well as other complications. All the complications follow the same pattern.
That is bananas. I've been
Yeah.
learning a little bit more about this over time. Can you also explain the psychological cost of trying to manage type 1 diabetes and any form of diabetes, but in particular type 1 diabetes? Again, you're talking about all these numbers fluctuating and trying to manage the carbohydrates and the insulin and getting it exactly perfect. It's come more to the forefront of the discussion of how difficult this is mentally for people. Can you comment on that?
It is. It's not easy. It's a full-time job to manage your blood sugars, and it doesn't ever let up, and it doesn't go away. Um, and yeah, I mean, you have to commit to that, and you have to acknowledge that this is a part of your life, and if you put it second, you're not going to have good results. And I would say the way that I'm managing it makes for the easiest to manage because my doses of insulin are going way down, so matching up my dose to my meals is much easier than these high carb meals and high doses of insulin. Um, I've I've managed my blood sugars with different methods too and gotten the same results because there's a lot of different ways you can do this, different insulins, and there's devices like insulin pumps. Um, so I've had results like this with just using injections of insulin, and normally a type 1 uses two insulins, a long-acting insulin to take care of all the glucose that your body makes throughout the day, and a short-acting insulin with meals. And so I've done that with those injections, but now I'm actually using a pump, and that's people have probably seen a CGM, the little patches on the arm. This is a little bit bigger than a CGM. You can see on my fingers are
Yep.
around it. It's a
Yep.
little bit bigger than a CGM, and it's giving me instead of those injections once a day of that long-acting insulin, this is giving me little doses throughout the day. And on top of that, it's using this software called Loop that will talk to my CGM, the blood sugar monitor, and additionally help regulate numbers on top of like the regular little amounts of insulin that I'm getting. So it's probably the easiest I've ever had to control numbers, and I think the technology these days is helping that both the continuous glucose monitoring and these new pumps. Sadly, though, if you just get a commercial insulin pump, the most commonly used ones, they have these automatic settings, but they target for blood sugars like between 100 and 120 instead of like 80 like mine is. The way that I'm able to get my pump to do that is this Loop software that you have to download this aftermarket app that's not even FDA approved. And in order to get that app, you have to pay $100 to Apple to get a developer account. And then you can put it on your phone, and then it'll run. It sounds like it's a very complicated process, but the website for Loop is like very very well done, and they walk you through the whole process, and it's anyone that can follow a recipe can basically do it. Um, Surprisingly, though, endocrinologists out there know about this software, and they're okay with it because it is really well done, And most people are still just using it like to get their blood sugars into that kind of ADA range. Um, it just has the option to be able to get your range into the truly normal numbers too. That's why a lot of us like it.
Wow. Okay. So you're talking about some fairly sophisticated and amazing technology that makes this very simple for you to manage. It sounds
Yep.
amazing, and especially contrasting what you've described as how somebody would normally have to manage this, or how you would have been managing this like 10 years ago doing finger sticks and trying to hit
Yep.
moving targets when you're only getting these small samples. It occurs, I'm not a coder and I don't develop software platforms, but it occurs to me that it would seem to be a very simple thing to put some type of slider in where you could set your own custom limits. It's strange to me that that's not like an option, that you have to find this like third party workaround to set the
Yeah.
level to be like a normal human blood sugar level.
I think the pump companies um, like the higher targets because this is really common among endocrinologists that they they fear like a low blood sugar could be a very quick accident or
Sure.
death even. Um, High blood sugars is a death 10, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. It's an early death, but it's long term. And it's expected. You're a type 1 diabetic, you're going to get long-term complications. So they would rather run you high and kind of cushion you from a low blood sugar instead of aiming for those lower targets and have a potential for going low. But that's not to say that the way I manage things means I'm having more low blood sugars. Um, I have less low blood sugars than the vast majority of type 1s out there because of the small amounts of insulin I'm using. And I always say this, a low blood sugar, a hypoglycemia, is an insulin overdose. And I don't very often overdose on insulin because my doses are very low and easy to kind of match up. So yeah, that's basically why those targets are so high and why the devices are kind of aiming. If you look at ads that people out there, the CGMs are getting popular among non-diabetics and people just interested to for the health benefits of normalizing mildly elevated blood sugars. But if you look at ads for like Dexcom and Libre, the two big companies, if you look at the blood sugars in the ads, it's always like triple digit numbers because that's what diabetics are seeing so often. Rarely do you see in the ads like normal blood sugars. It's crazy.
That's wild. Yeah, that's wild to me. Okay, so a hypo event, what type of blood sugar would you expect to see to have an event? Like you're talking about like having a buffer, like couldn't that be like set the limit at like 70, 60, 70? Like wouldn't that give you plenty of time to deal with a hypo event?
Under 70 is considered hypoglycemia.
Okay.
And now I correct if I'm trending under 70. Um, you will find healthy young insulin sensitive non-diabetics with blood sugars in the high 60s sometimes. So that number might be if you're in that group of people, slightly lower than that might be fine, but I think 70 is a good point to if I'm a type 1 to correct. And so yeah, and I again rarely do I have to correct, but if I do, well, when a typical type 1 diabetic has a low blood sugar, remember they're taking these high doses of insulin, they're crashing down, they are chugging a big juice box, they're eating a big thing of fruit, they're just munching on a lot of food because they're having a very severe low and a lot of insulin driving that down. When I have a low, I what very very commonly type 1s following a low carb Bernstein approach we use these Smarties candies. Um,
Hmm.
Smarties they don't use sucrose or high fructose corn syrup as their sweetener, and they use dextrose, which dextrose is pure glucose. The sucrose and the high fructose corn syrup are both about 50-50 sucrose or glucose and fructose. Only the glucose is raising the blood sugar. Um, we use these because it allows me to use the smallest amount in a kind of a precise measured amount too. Um, and so I'll sometimes use half of one of these rolls. One roll is 6 grams of carbs. So I'm using like 3 grams of carbs to move that 68 blood sugar back up into 80. Um, so yeah, even if I use a whole roll, it's a very small correction. So just like my insulin doses are small, my low corrections are very small and um, less severe. So this way of managing is much safer for type 1 diabetics as long as they're doing everything like this. And I mentioned Bernstein a couple times. It's Dr. Bernstein, whose method I follow. Um, People who might not know too much about him will kind of assume his book is just like a diet guru book, but his book Diabetes Solution is a comprehensive diabetes management guide that goes into all areas like this, how to kind of properly manage type 1 diabetes to achieve normal non-diabetic blood sugars. The diet is a crucial component of it, but there's a lot more involved in managing.
Yeah. And talk about it.
Bernstein is a type 1 diabetic who turned 90 years old this summer. He's still alive, he's still kicking it. Yeah.
Yeah, talk about a resource that's held up over time. I mean, so many of the guests on our show talking about like finding his work and how amazing it's been for them. And I cannot believe I'm saying this. Finally, after 700 episodes of Boundless Body Radio, we have a candy sponsor, Smarties. Reach out. You can fund us. We got a sponsor. That's amazing. Never thought we'd be saying that.
So again, if they sell glucose tablets in any pharmacy or Amazon or whatever, they're expensive. So a little vial of glucose tablets is expensive. These are exactly the same ingredient as those glucose tablets. Fraction. I buy box bulk on Amazon for like $10. I buy like a 5 pound box, and that way they're like disposable. I can grab some, put it in my pocket, have it in the console of my car, on my desk, and yeah. So if you're type 1, don't don't waste your money on glucose tablets. Just get Smarties. They're the same thing.
That's great. That's great. And like you mentioned, like half a roll, you know how many grams that is. And they're tiny, so you can microdose a little bit as well. I'm sure that's quite helpful for people
and
if they
many
really want to get.
type 1 children that need really small doses of both insulin and glucose will use even one Smartie sometimes.
Yeah.
And what I like about these is that I don't like them. I mean, I'm not candy. I was never into candy, but it wouldn't be a candy I would ever reach for. So I'm not tempted to overdo it, which can happen when you have a hypoglycemia. You get hungry. There's a bit of an adrenaline rush, and you have the urge to eat and eat. And if you're going to make yourself a snack to correct a low, it's really hard to have the control to not overeat and eat more than you need, and then you're gonna have a high after that low.
Yep.
I treat this like a medication. This is not a snack. It's a measured medication. It's measured dose to correct that low.
I love that. Wow. That's awesome. That's great. I was going to talk to you specifically about your food. In particular, if we assume that you're eating very low or no carbohydrates, you're eating mostly proteins and fats. I'm wondering how you look at those two things, if you have to manage the protein to fat ratio or how you need to dose insulin differently for those two things. Like what is a typical day of your normal eating, and how do you have to manage insulin to cover both the protein and the fats that you consume?
Yeah, for typical meals, I'm not really. I'm only really focusing on the protein. I kind of do moderate fat. That's Bernstein's approach too. If I'm incredibly active for a period of time, I might increase fat. But I keep fat kind of moderate. But the protein is always very high, and I dose my insulin based on how much protein I'm eating. And I actually use an old insulin. This is it's called regular insulin, R insulin, and it's a slower, milder insulin. And so a lot of diabetics, especially if they've been a type 1 for a while, when this was the only insulin available, they don't like this because this milder insulin is tough to use for high carb fast foods, but it's really good for slower burn foods like protein. So yeah, I measure how much insulin based on not how many grams of protein are in the food, but like the weight of the whole food. And so I have a ratio of how many units of insulin for how many ounces of that protein food. and I'll take this like 20 minutes before a meal, eat my protein, and then I have a smooth number after that. If you didn't do that, you do see a spike in blood sugar, a mild spike from eating protein, and it's usually like a 1 to 4 hour spike after the meal. A lot of people take note of this and think that why am I eating this protein if it's turning into sugar? But it's really not what's happening. It's not gluconeogenesis that's happening. That spike is your liver dumping glycogen during the digestive process. So in a normal non-diabetic, food's passing through your digestive system, and your body's releasing insulin, and your body's releasing its counterpart glucagon, which balance each other out and give you like tight control. I don't make the insulin anymore. I only make the glucagon, and so that glycogen is getting released, and the blood sugar is spiking. But if I take insulin, the kind of hormonal action of that insulin is going to keep that glycogen from being released and keep my blood sugar normalized. So you're essentially not taking insulin to to combat like the protein turning into sugar. You're taking insulin to stop that release of that sugar.
Yeah.
So that's basically what. Now fat, on the other hand, if I start overdoing it with fat, it's not a post meal spike. It's just my whole day will elevate a little bit, and I'll need more of that long actings. So yeah, that's kind of the only way I'd kind of manage fat like that. But if I was doing if I was in a situation where that fat is doing that, it probably means I'm gaining weight and I'm eating too much more than my body needs. So, before I got to that point, I would probably cut back on fat and, check to make sure that I'm at the leanness that I want to be at and find some kind of balance in the middle ground.
Yeah, gotcha. It's something, again, so underappreciated on my end about type 1 diabetes. I've just learned over time, and again, just so underappreciated how much type 1 diabetes teaches all of us about our human metabolism, regardless of whether you have type 1 diabetes or not. It's such an interesting insight into how our metabolism works. Again, whether or not you have the diagnosis or not, it's quite interesting to hear all these stories and like, wow, this can teach us all kinds of stuff for lots of people in many different contexts.
Yeah, I'm driving the car with manual transmission, so you can see how the engine's working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so I love the way that you're eating and approaching that. It all seems very much more simple than the conventional way of approaching things. And then I follow you on Twitter, and you're posting and sharing some of these posts from the American Diabetes Association of like these recipes and calling these out for being like, this is absolutely nonsense. Can you tell us why the American Diabetes Association is making food recommendations that seem to be completely the opposite of what you're
Yeah.
suggesting here? It's like embarrassing. I don't get it.
Yeah. Their recipe site is all over the place. They do have some low carb recipes on the American Diabetes Association recipe site. They're usually pretty terrible, and they usually try to be simultaneously low fat and low carb, because they are adamant about diabetics should not consume fat. Fat should be low. And so you do see low carb recipes. They're just terrible. Majority of the recipes are kind of, the balanced, food plate kind of diet. Actually, I'm going to pull up my recipe thing here. I have it in that PowerPoint. Um, so when I first started posting these recipes, you know, I know for like the vast majority, I'm not going to win everyone over on cutting out all the carbs, but added sugar is something that is almost universally accepted as being bad, right? No matter your diet, can't even like the low fat vegan type ones don't do any added sugar. But I found, I don't know, at least 20 or more recipes on ADA site with straight up sugar in the ingredients, which makes no sense. A salad, why would you put sugar on the salad, right? This was a really famous one. This like a cucumber in vinegar mixed with a quarter cup of sugar.
What? Okay, so again, if you're listening and not watching, this is a recipe. Sweet and sour cucumber. It's quite small what I'm looking at, but it's sweet and sour cucumbers, and it's a quarter. The recipe's a quarter cup of sugar.
Yeah, it's making like a pickled kind of quick cucumber thing. This is the only one that the ADA actually acknowledged, and they actually took the recipe down. So
Wow.
good on them for taking the quarter cup of sugar down. People were still trying to defend this, saying that what serving size is like three little cucumbers, so you're not eating that much sugar. It's like, why though? Why add any sugar? Put monk fruit, put stevia, put something else in there, or just have cucumbers without sugar. Try that. But yeah, they did take that one. The rest of these, no. Look, this is a melon cooler with cantaloupe or honeydew, orange juice, and sugar blended into a smoothie.
That's a disaster.
Yeah. Pasta salad, which I mean, again, I was calling out these recipes initially, not even because of the pasta, but because of that. And I don't think diabetics should eat pasta, but added sugar. And there's plenty of low carb alternatives for pasta these days. So this would just be a disaster for any diabetic, type 1 or type 2. Flan with sugar, another cucumber dish with sugar. Um, this it's just total added sugar when this farro, edamame, and dried cranberry salad, 44 grams of sugar in this dish.
That's
Um,
insane.
yeah, sugar and half a cup of sugar in these brownies.
Oh my goodness. They're muffins. It doesn't,
Banana
it's not,
muffins.
they're not even brownies, they're muffins. It's like
And and,
breakfast food.
and look, I'm not even pointing out that there's there's flour in here. It's gluten-free flour, but it's carb flour, quinoa, which is a high iron carb. So there's starch in here as well. Another salad with sugar. Apple crisp,
Apple
brown
crisp.
sugar. There's nothing healthy about brown sugar. It's white sugar with molasses, flour, and oats. There's so many good recipes out there for type ones, and it just blows my mind that how bad most of these recipes are. Um, the other one, brown sugar. All this is peanut butter, brown sugar, and bananas.
Oh my goodness. Sweet peanut buttery dip. Wow. Yeah.
Um, there's one of the last ones I did, steak, steak with smothered onions, and they add brown sugar to the steak.
What? Come on.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't ruin a steak. Come on.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, a pasta salad, 67, one serving, 67 grams of carbs. It's gonna
That's
be a
crazy.
disaster.
That's
Um,
wow.
yeah,
Oh
so
my
I
goodness.
post. I never get any response from the ADA. They didn't. So after that cucumber one, I called out the CEO of the. I always tag him. I tag Dr. Bob, who's their science advisor. And after that cucumber one, the CEO blocked me on Twitter, and then I screenshotted his block and kept, everyone kind of started tagging him. He actually unblocked me after the outcry from so many people because um, if they're putting this stuff out, if I'm wrong and they believe they're right, they defend it. Tell me no, you're wrong. This is a great meal for diabetic. But they don't. They don't even answer. They don't address it. They don't do anything.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. You can choose how strongly you want to word your response, but like, is there any excuse at this point to continue making some of those recommendations? I mean, all those recipes that you're showing me are eye-wateringly high in carbohydrates. Is it just ignorance? Is it they haven't learned this information, or is this like on purpose, in your opinion?
They're stuck in old nutrition thinking, which is low fat. Low fat, low sodium is like on almost all of their recipes. Um, and they also have the high blood sugar targets. So, you can eat a little bit of crappy food and spike, but that's normal for type 1. So, you know, I always say this, if they just started with the goal of normal blood sugars for type 1s, and then let everyone work backwards from that to do whatever diet you think
Sure.
works to achieve that, people would be eating very, very differently. But they kind of lie to people in telling them that they can have this very wide range, and if you fall in that range, you're okay. But yeah, that's kind of how they get away with it. And um, I've been once to the ADA. I had a meeting that a friend of mine set up with the former CEO, Tracy Brown, who was awesome. She
Yeah.
type 2 diabetic herself, and she went on a low carb diet. I had reached out to her when she became that, and she was very supportive and open, and started on my recommendation, got Bernstein's book and has a tweet reading it. She made some changes at the ADA, but it's a big organization. But anyways, I went there and met with her. And then it was nice to talk about a few things. It was nothing like consequential though. And afterwards, I was just with some of the staff there, and the topic of the recipes came up, and they were all like, I saw a look of frustration on all their faces, like it was like out of their control, like they couldn't they couldn't do anything about it. Like whoever is that department at the ADA is some old school dietitian kind of thing, and they won't change. So yeah, I saw it in the eyes of these people that are working at the ADA that they're aware how ridiculous these are, but it doesn't seem like they can change it.
Didn't they end up getting rid of her?
She's no longer the CEO. I don't know if it was like getting rid of her, but she's no longer the CEO. I think she served for like 2 years. So I'm not sure if it was like they kicked her
I
out or that was the end of her time or not. But she's no longer. Yeah.
Okay. I hope I'm not misremembering this. I think I'm remembering this accurately. I think she came out and said something about low carb and how much it had helped her. And she
Oh
was like
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
promoting it as a message. And then it was like the
Yep.
next day or the next week, there was a video of her. It looked like a hostage video. Like seriously, it looked like somebody put her up to doing it, where she was like, well, many diets can work and it's not just low carb. And she really had to like, she
Yeah.
was it looked like, again, like voluntarily like walking back what she said, but it didn't seem like it was her voice. You know what I mean?
I've seen that as well. And yeah, it seems like, I mean, they're not like a health, it's like a political organization. It's not a health organization, and they have to deal with all their sponsors. They have to deal with the drug companies who they promote. Actually, let me show you one other thing from that
Please.
slideshow. I skipped over this, but this kind of is really telling. Um, so this was their standards of care for 2024. And I downloaded this like huge PDF that's all of their guidelines for all managing all diabetes, right? I did like a control F to search for terms in there. Um, Diet terms, I searched low carb diet, appears 4 times in all of their huge volume of the standards of care for 2024. Ketogenic diet 4 times, low carb diet 15 times. Very small. And I did other diets too, Mediterranean diet, vegan diet, all very, very, very low, like between 4 or 5 mentions, very, very low. I I searched a drug like GLP-1 and 169 times mentioned. You can do
Okay.
it yourself. Anyone can download this in the air and do the same search. So they mentioned this drug 169 times, but these diets, even the diet, vegan diet, it was like 4 times. So why isn't the focus more on diet? It blows my mind.
Okay.
Um,
So just to reiterate, this is the diabetes care
their
manual,
standards of care,
their standards of
what
care.
physicians follow, what the endocrinologists follow to manage diabetes, basically, right?
Then the words low carb, ketogenic, like even other diets, like you mentioned, like even vegan diets, like, which you don't practice or really recommend to people. But any diet, it has low single digit mentions. Yet GLP-1, as far as the medication, has over 100, well over 100.
169, yeah, yep.
Dude, it's
Huh.
I don't understand. I can't reconcile this. Like when you get on our episode and you tell us from the beginning, like more people are finding this, more people are seeking you out. People are learning about low carbohydrate and how wonderful it is for type 1 diabetes. We see how much the type 1 grit page is increasing. And
Yeah.
yet, like, but I can't reconcile all this. It's insane.
This is if someone's listening and don't know, GLP-1 is the Ozempic class
Yep.
of drugs. They love that. You see so much pushing to get people on these drugs, but yeah, I mean it's literally in their standards of care. So to mention 169 times, it's insane. And no wonder why you go to your endocrinologist and they don't talk about your diet because the standard of care just doesn't dictate that.
That's wild. I love that you did that search, and yeah, thank you for showing that graphic. That is just so stark, and I just don't know why I keep being surprised by some of this stuff, but it's just so bad. It's so embarrassing, and it never seems to get any better from the top down. And on that note,
Yeah.
like you're on the ground, you're sharing stuff on Twitter, you're running your practice. What does it mean to you to be able to share this message with people and give them alternate information?
Oh, I'm very happy to. I love talking about this stuff, and as I mentioned before, I'm happy that I'm hearing more and more people finding this stuff. The information's out there, so people are quickly wising up when they get a diagnosis, and they're learning quickly about these alternatives. And I'm happy to contribute to that. That the information that's out there and continue to help people to learn this stuff.
Yeah. Wow, man. I mean, I'm looking at you. You're in your mid 40s, kiddo on the way. Congratulations. That's super cool. You look so healthy and happy. And I can see when somebody is living their purpose and like you wake up every day and you have energy and you share your message. And like, yeah, it's super frustrating that more people are not getting this information, but it must just feel absolutely amazing to know that you've found this and you're now making a difference in so many people's lives out there.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, it does make me happy, and I'm glad to do what I do. And had I never been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I don't know what I would be doing. I eventually would have gotten out of the army, but no, I didn't have any kind of career dreams or pursuits I wanted to go after. But I'm glad this is giving me something to be passionate about and to help people with.
Yeah. Well, no, I think it was so interesting what you said earlier. Like I never dreamt that I would be in the medical industry or doing anything related to what a doctor does. And so for you to take this message and move it forward, I think is absolutely wonderful. Is there anything you're looking forward to in the future or anything you're working on?
Nothing. I mean, I got the kid on the way in November, but
That's kind
work
of a big
wise,
thing.
I'm gonna keep doing more of what I do. I'm gonna try to be making some video content and do a little bit more like that. But yeah, otherwise continue to help people
Awesome.
in my office here in Connecticut and yeah, keep spreading the message.
Dude, I love that. That's fantastic. And yeah, the kiddo on the way is that'll be enough to keep you busy for quite a while, I'm sure. So that's fantastic. I really love what you're doing and spreading this message around is fantastic. I hope the next time that we chat is not another 3 years in the future. Let's chat a little bit more frequently than that because again, I love the message and I think it's really important for people out there to hear to counter what they're getting from some of these organizations that are just it's borderline. It's getting to be borderline criminal in my opinion. Like I can't even believe some of the things they're saying. But anyway, Dr. Ryan Attar, thank you again so very much for spending time with us today. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, they go right to my website, drattar.com, DRATTAR.com. I'm also on Twitter pretty actively, and it's just my name, Ryan Attar, RyanAttar on Twitter.
That is
Or
very
X, too.
There we go. Exactly. I'm staying firm on the Twitter thing, by the way. I'm gonna write that down. But yeah. So thank you for keeping that very simple. In case the listener needs, we'll link all of that in the show notes. But yeah, Dr. Attar, I really appreciate everything that you are bringing to the table and sharing with not only your patients but also on social media where a lot of people are and are finding your information. So again, it's so great to catch up with you. Thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's been an honor to host you again. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.